Good afternoon. The bottom line up front. The intelligence community must be thorough and evidence-based in dissemination. Thoroughness prevents backlash, protects credibility, and ensures policymakers act on truth, not assumptions. ICD 203 is our foundation. It demands timeliness, relevance, objectivity, sourcing, and clear confidence levels. Without those standards, dissemination risks bias, politicalization, and the kind of backlash that undermines both leaders and the intelligence community. We've seen cases where adherence to ICD 203 protected the IC's credibility. For example, in counterterrorism analysis after 9/11, analysts were required to explicitly state the confidence levels and identify sourcing gaps when assessing al-Qaeda's structure and capabilities. By documenting not only what was known but also what was uncertain, the IC helped policymakers avoid overstating the group's reach and kept expectations tethered to evidence. That practice reflected the very heart of ICD 203. Dissemination is the weakest link in the cycle. It is where analysis either protects national security or misleads decision makers. If the IC oversells or buries caveats, leaders act on a distorted picture, which is how credibility is lost. Case in point, last week in September of 2025, the U.S. struck a Venezuelan drug boat. An explosion killed 3 people. Rutgers, PBS, and Newsweek reported gaps in detail. Cargo amounts were unclear, roles of those killed were uncertain, and escalation risk unresolved. When dissemination is not thorough, tactical events are oversold as strategic wins. Then backlash comes when the evidence doesn't match the message. It is here where we can contrast the 9/11 example with the September 2025 Venezuelan drug boat strike. If intelligence briefings highlight that only a boat was destroyed and drugs were suspected on board, but leave out caveats on the cargo's actual scale or the low-level role of those killed, then dissemination is incomplete. Without ICD 203 discipline, timeliness, relevance, objectivity, and explicit confidence statements, the IC risks fueling a narrative of decisive victory that later unravels under scrutiny. And when the public record contradicts the initial message, backlash follows, damaging both policymakers and the intelligence community itself. That is why ICD 203 is not just a set of analytic standards, it is a safeguard against credibility loss. Thus is the reason why PAL's role still matters today. Looking at the previous picture, use PAL's guidance to tell you what you know, what you don't know, and what you think, and determine the difference between each. What we know. Venezuelan vessel was destroyed last week in U.S. military strikes. 3 people were confirmed dead in the explosion. Imagery and reporting indicate the boat was traveling on known narcotics routes, which I will post below, and the administration publicly characterized it as a cartel operation. Those are the facts we can verify. What we don't know. The scale of narcotics on board remains unclear. Were these shipments that could extremely damage the cartels, or were they merely just low-level supply? Also, were those involved leaders, or again, were they just middlemen that are easy to find? And importantly, we lack full visibility into how this strike will be interpreted by the Venezuelan government, by regional partners, and by the cartels themselves. What we think. If the boat carried only small packages and expendable operatives, then the tactical action may not equal strategic success. It could be a short-term disruption, not a long-term blow to the networks. And escalation risks grow. Retaliation from cartels, diplomatic fallout from Venezuela, and questions from the international community about proportionality and evidence come forward. This is why PAL's guidance matters, separating knowns versus unknowns. An assessment forces us to brief leaders with clarity and humility. It prevents us from overselling tactical wins and prepares decision makers for the full spectrum of consequences. I've seen firsthand how human factors complicate dissemination. In narcotics investigations, undercover officers begin with no personal background in addiction, yet the constant exposure to high-risk environments, the stress of isolation, and the pressure to make split-second choices without backup can corrode judgment. Some agents even develop dependencies themselves, blurring the line between observer and participant. When the reporting comes back, it may be clouded with fatigue, drama, or compromised perspective. And here's the ethical challenge. As analysts or officers, we may feel the temptation to soften the message, downplay caveats, or frame findings in a way that keep trust with the chain of command or makes us more likable to decision makers. But when we let that desire to please override objectivity, we fail our mission. Thorough dissemination requires the harder path. It means telling the whole truth, caveats included, even if it risks friction in the room. Because if we withhold the cracks in the story, we set leaders up for backlash when reality catches up to the intelligence. So how do we prevent backlash? By giving executives enough detail to be accurate, but not so much that they lose focus. That balance comes through funneling a bluff, key transition, then a single takeaway. Here's my checklist rooted in ICD 203. Always start with a bluff. Separate the facts, the gaps, and the judgments. State confidence levels, high, medium, or low. Flag sources and reliability issues. Use short annexes and caveats, not data dumps. And keep dialogue candid, not compliant. Additionally, Christian ethics reinforce this. Ephesians 4:25 says, "Put off falsehood and speak truthfully," while Proverbs 12:22 says, "The Lord delights in the trustworthy." For intelligence officers, thorough, truthful dissemination is stewardship of trust and life. Closing bluff. Thoroughness and dissemination prevents backlash. ICD 203 gives us the standard. PAL gives us the method. The Venice Family boat explosion shows the cost of skipping caveats. To prevent misrepresentation, we must be thorough and honest in our beliefs, reporting, and analysis. Verbal sources for today include ICD 203 analytic standards, ODNI objectivity values, and reporting from Rutgers, PBS, and Newsweek on the September 2025 strike.